Cool beans, cool beans. Welcome, 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 ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the midweek technical and fundamental analysis. Before I jump into it, let me give a quick disclaimer as always. This is not financial advice. Anything that I share throughout this analysis is for educational purposes only. I repeat, this is not financial advice. Anything that I share throughout this analysis is for educational purposes only. Cool beans, cool beans. So, jumping into the technical analysis this week. If we look back over the beginning of the week analysis, I told you guys that I wanted to see how DXY reacted to these levels that we are currently at, right? You know, we opened up here Monday, right? And I told you guys that I wanted to see how we reacted to this level. Well, as you can see, we're still inside of those levels. We haven't closed out of those levels to either the up or the downside, right? So I'll let Corman go over the fundamentals, but with the fundamentals for the last couple of days of the week. I want to see if we push down aggressively off of the levels, right? Or if we can break above consequent encroachment of this daily fair value gap that we're inside also, right? And close above consequent encroachment. That will determine my next play or my next bias, should I say, for the dollar. But as of now, that's what I'm waiting on. I'm waiting for um an aggressive move one way or the other. Cool beans, cool beans. But my my bias for the dollar is to continue lower. I want to see us continue lower to reach down into this imbalance that we see to the downside. But there's confirmations that I need to see before I actually um would run with shorting the dollar to the downside, right? And those confirmations is what I just said. Us breaking aggressively below the monthly sell side liquidity and closing below it, or us breaking aggressively above consequent encroachment of this daily fair value gap and closing above it. And then that will determine whether we're going back up here to these monthly PD array levels or whether we're coming down to run this swing low down inside this daily fair value gap. Cool beans, cool beans. So with that being said, um, let's look at our currency. All right, so we are back down inside the identified area that I marked in the beginning of the week analysis. And I told you guys that I wanted to see us come down um, into these levels, right? We're down into these levels now. So what I'll be paying attention to is how Euro USD um, reacts to this level throughout the rest of Asian markets tonight and going into London. Same thing as with DSY. I need to see some confirmations, right? Meaning I need to see us aggressively breaking close below the daily fair value gap or breaking close above it. That will determine what areas of liquidity I target next, right? So that's what I'm waiting for Euro USD. Of course, if I expect to see the dollar to continue lower, then that means I expect Euro USD to continue high. Cool beans, cool beans. So I would love to see us get back above this daily fair value gap aggressively and close above it for us to continue higher, targeting these weekly PD array levels and this imbalance that we see in Euro USD right. Cool beans, cool beans. Same thing with the pound. I wanted to see us come down and retest this monthly buy side liquidity down inside of this imbalance, this daily fair value gap, and continue higher. So we haven't made it to those levels yet, right? But we is inside of this daily fair value gap, so price could respect the level that it's currently at and continue higher from its current level. We just have to pay attention to the market throughout the rest of Asia and going into London. Um, for NZD USD, I wanted to see us come down into this imbalance, right? Retesting the top of this breaker block, right? This swing high right here, right? But as you can see, NZD USD has dropped below that down into this imbalance. So we'll see how price reacts to the imbalance that it's sitting inside of now. Whether it respects it and swing back up to this fair value gap in this imbalance here, or whether we continue lower to run this swing low, right? And drop down inside of this daily fair value gap. All right, so we'll just pay attention to the markets throughout the rest of Asia and going into London. Looking at ES, we I wanted to see us come down here, clean up all of this, right? Because remember last week I wanted to see us come down in here, clean up all this with the news of the assassination attempt on Trump, right? I was expecting us to have a bearish, you know, reaction to that, but I was expecting us to open up with a gap for that reaction last week, right? But we had 2 days up as a little shake out or squeeze out on this liquidity here before we had the markets to sell off like I wanted it to, right? But we did get the sell off that I was anticipating, right? And this week, of course, we see another sell off with the news of President Biden stepping down and not, running for running for the seat this year. So we're seeing the reaction to that news play out now, and I do expect to see ES continue to come on down and clean up all of these all of these discount levels to the downside, right? Before continuing higher. So I'm anticipating some kind of good news coming out or the numbers from high impacting news drivers to be excellent or great to, help push futures markets back to the upside. And that's pretty much across the board with ES and NQ. Even though with NQ, we can see that NQ has already cleaned up most of that downside liquidity or discount prices, right? We already cleaned up all of that with NQ. As with ES, we still have some more selling off to do before cleaning up those discount levels, right? So with NQ, let's just see if if it's the leading pair of the two, right? Sorry about that, went to the wrong NQ chart. Let's see if it's the leading pair of the two and go ahead and starts to push back up. And let's see if ES, sells off, shows some divergence, and then have to catch up to NQ. But I'm expecting NQ to pull back up into today's premium levels of today's price action. Cool beans, cool beans. And that'll pretty much do it for the midweek technical analysis. At this time, I pass it over to our unicorn so she can give us the midweek fundamental sauce. It is all yours, Connor. Take it away.
All right. Hi, everybody. So, um, I'm just gonna briefly tell you what I'm going to cover tonight. And some of these things I will have to cover on Friday in more detail just because I feel like it's too important just to kind of skip over. And then also it's kind of a mindset thing too. So um I will be talking about the markets as a whole. Some of that I'll talk about tonight, mostly Friday. Um, Also just correlating some of the charts Mr. Levels just went over. Um, Stocks, I'll talk a little bit about currencies, some of the more high impacting news, and it's not even things that show up on the Forex Factory calendar because remember, a lot of things that drive markets don't show up on the Forex Factory calendar. These are those news events that show up as, breaking news things that kind of interrupt your, regularly scheduled program. Um, so we'll talk about some of those things. And then this is one of the topics. It correlates with the overall market talk, but what it means to vote Democrat versus Republican when it comes to the markets. It's kind of heavy. And it's not a persuasion thing, it's a mindset thing. It's how do Democrats see the market versus how do Republicans see the market? And then also, how do markets react when there's a Republican in office versus a Democrat? So it's more of a mindset of the parties, but also helping you with your mindset to say, okay, no matter what happens in November, no matter who is in office, you'll have an idea based on history, which lately has somewhat been repeating itself, um, but not always. You can have a general idea of what could possibly happen for the next administration. Um, I am going to share my screen. It's going to be on the Forex Factory calendar, but I'm just going to be talking for a few minutes before I actually get to that. Um, okay. So, when we look at some of the charts, or when we think about some of the charts that Mr. Levels just went over, especially when it comes to futures, there were lots of events that drove the market in both ways. So um, we had the news of President or former President Trump's assassination attempt. So when that happened, obviously it's one of those news items that's going to um, polarize or be a polarizing topic. Um, the markets reacted well to the fact that it was an attempt. It wasn't successful. Trump's still alive. He's still able to be in the race. You can also look at market performance when he was in office. The markets appreciated Trump when he was in office. So to me, that's not really a big surprise. But it also speaks to how the market has feelings in a way. When I say has feelings, it's because um even when you look back through history and you see any type of event in America that happens that's an emotional event, something that's tragic, and it doesn't end well, the markets just tend to slide off and just have a bad day and just react really negatively to it. In the depending on how severe it is, that day, the next 2 to 3 days, and possibly even a week or more after that. So it does show that the market, and I'm kind of personifying the market in a way, but the market cares. Um, but if you look at some of the underlying mechanics of the market, the thought process, the mindset, it's like, okay, good, Trump's still alive to run in the race this fall. Otherwise, you would have to look for another candidate. and then someone else that you have to now introduce to the public, get them on that person's side in a matter of months. You have like not even at this point 4 months, you have like three in a week maybe. And on the flip side of that, if we look at the Democratic Party, that's literally what they're having to do right now. So they're having to put a new face in front of the people and say, hey, look, this is now the person who we need for you to get behind. There is a track record of Kamala Harris with the people, some good, some bad, depending on what side you lean towards, depending on what your ideals are, your morals, your ethics, you either like her or you don't. I feel like she is a very she is a person that if you put her in front of people, they could easily say yes or no. If a person, in my opinion, can't say yes or no to her immediately, then either A, they haven't followed her enough or listened to her talk enough to be able to say yes or no, or they're the type of person where their ideals and their morals fluctuate. So they would be considered more of an independent and someone who looks to the left for certain things, looks to the right for certain things, but they're never clear based on a party. They're clear just based on a candidate. Like, okay, does this candidate check off enough boxes for me to say yes? And so they would have to think about it. So with Biden stepping out of the race and Kamala kind of at this point stepping forward, the Democrats kind of pushing for her. I mean, from an ideals standpoint and things that she's for, I mean, they're pretty similar. One thing I will say is that if you've if you've listened to her during speeches and during meetings that she's had, what strikes me as being it's not odd, but it's very unconventional, is there's one that kind of goes around, just sticks out in my mind, and someone sent it to me the other day and I forgot about it, and it's funny now, but it's concerning depending on how you look at things. You know, she's sitting at the head of this table, she introduces herself, she gives her pronouns, and then she proceeds to like describe herself. I understand, you know, they were doing it for someone that was there. However, that wasn't the only time she did it. And I'm like, if that's what I have to go through for the next 4 years of you like literally sitting or standing and you proceed to give a 5-minute prelogue of a demonstration of stuff that I can see and stuff that I already know about you, don't cater. I don't know. Anyway, that'll be part of my Friday talk when we talk about Democrats versus Republicans and ideals and how the market sees certain things. That's part of how like let me just put it this way. That'll be part of what I talk about when it comes to Democrats. And it'll definitely be more on the side of like how the media describes things and how the media pushes things and then how that pushes the market. Again, it's not going to be super heavy into like personal views. It will definitely correlate to the polls, how people see things, how the market fluctuates. Because to me, that matters. Whenever you're sitting down, even if you, whether you believe in someone speaking about pronouns or not, when you look at how those things affect the market, it affects the market in a big way. And just to kind of give you an example, so you don't think I'm just like saying it to be saying it, when a company comes out with a campaign Now, people are so quick to cancel, dismiss, boycott a company because they didn't say something the correct way. That has domino effects across the market, small and big. Um, when you start to look at insurance companies, what insurance companies cover, what they don't cover on a corporate side, and then you also start to look at the fact that now, even if you say, I don't like Pepsi because Pepsi's ad really made me feel a certain way. When you go to the store, you go down the aisle and you're like, oh, I don't like that. I'm not buying Pepsi. I'm going to buy Coke. But then you continue down the aisle and you buy Lay's potato chips. Well, you still just gave them money. Companies now are so big, um, they can compensate for things. But then also on the back end, there's insurance, there's inflation that happens, there's certain markets that companies won't cater to anymore. So, like I said, those things have a domino effect. Whatever starts at the head, it kind of trickles down to those below, and those below tend to have the indirect way of pushing the market one way or the other. All right. So that'll be more Friday. So back to the charts that back to the charts that Mr. Levels had pulled up. So a lot of what we see in the markets right now, because that candle, if you look at the last candlestick, and I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen for a second, um, so that Mr. Levels can share his screen and actually pull up one of the futures charts. It doesn't matter which one. I guess you could pull up ES. Um, cool. So when we look at this last candlestick that just happened, it's huge. And when I say it's huge, I mean it's huge. If you look at how big it is compared to the past, I mean months, that candlestick just has so much volume in it, which means there were so many trades and contracts traded back and forth that um is significant. What that tells you is there was something that happened in the market that drove that volume. People were scared. What made people scared? Well, it's a few things. It's the news I've been talking about. It's, you have an assassination attempt on a former president who's trying to run for office again this year. That's a hit to democracy. It's like, hey, why are we trying to do this? That's not cool. Let's just fight fair or play fair. But then you have the current president saying, I'm not going to run. And now you have to find a new face for the Democrat Party. And now you have Kamala Harris stepping in. You have this whole like transition of what's going to happen in November starting to happen. But then most people forget we are in a heavy earnings season. And I can tell you about 16 to 20, I just say 16 of the one of companies that we know or would relatively be familiar with that just missed. This was a conversation that we were kind of having when we were talking about inflation and inflation expectations over the next coming quarters. So when inflation hits, inflation doesn't just show up right now. Even though, you see the percentages show up whenever the Fed is talking, or you might have the president talking or the Treasury Secretary, doesn't matter who. Anybody who's talking about inflation, they're talking about inflation, but in the past, because you're doing a comparison in the past. Expectations kind of tell you what could possibly happen in the future, but that's the broad economy. What often gets overlooked on the corporate side of things is that there has to be a way to keep consumers happy, but also still make profit and also still get raw materials and still be able to manufacture those materials at a reasonable cost, a reasonable level. And then, oh yeah, we're still trying to hit these climate and carbon goals that we're supposed to meet in the next 6 years. So we're trying to change this about our way of doing things or way of production. So it's a lot of things. Even if you took that out of the equation, inflation takes time to really show up in certain markets. Corporate markets, they have cushions. They're supposed to have cushions built into the system that actually help them to cope with times like these. They can take small hits to their earnings and compensate by shifting some real estate here, shifting some money there, bonds if they have them. They can shift that kind of stuff around and still pad their earnings and make it look good. But if inflation continues to run on and on and on, they can't compensate for that over time. It's like, look, either we jack up prices and really make our consumers mad, or we just got to face the funk and just say, look, like we're just not hitting targets. A way to hit targets, which people won't like, people don't like it when it happens, and it often gets looked at as a bad thing with the media, which I'll cover that Friday, is the fact that uh these, at least physical stores anyway, close because that cuts overhead costs. So a lot of companies will kind of do it very, very slowly. They'll close 2 or 3 stores at a time, but do it on a rolling basis. So every couple of months, they're closing, 5 to 10 stores here, some there. Um, Now that you've had, and it's not now, but it's just more evident now. People going into stores claiming a 5 finger discount. So, they run in with an empty bag, fill it up, run out of the store. And a lot of employees are told not to chase. By the time police show up, people are gone. All you can do is air a video, say, if you know, let us know. But that also impacts corporate inflation. Again, I'll cover that on Friday, but I feel like a lot of those things is what's happening now in the market. A lot of those things are starting to show up. A lot of the corporations that tag team with one another, we can go back and talk about the Microsoft CrowdStrike partnership, how it kind of crippled the world essentially. There are partnerships like that all over corporate America. And when you start to look at one corporation, if one corporation doesn't do well, if you know the partnerships that that corporation has, you can kind of estimate what the earnings of the partners will be if they come later. Um, it's a lot of that. A lot of the companies that have shown up and just haven't done well, like Waste Management, Capital One, Ford, Tesla, Google, aka Alphabet, um, some of the resorts, some semiconductor companies. It's not just localized to one particular area of the market. This is kind of like a broad happening. And some will say, well, when will this kind of go away after the election? The summer is supposed to be your most chill kind of time in the market. You expect the most market turbulence at the beginning of the year, right at earnings, talking about the holiday season. You expect it around the holiday season. You expect it in the fall around September, October. The middle of the year is kind of like when people are just kind of like, la, 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 whatever. Not this time. I told you guys too, this is an election year, so anything can happen. Expect the unexpected. Things get crazy in election years. It's not the first time, it won't be the last time that this happens, where you just have crazy news that happens in the quarter before, and it makes you wonder, like, what's going on. I will say that and again, we'll talk about this on Friday because it correlates with market reactions. But depending on so right now we have a Democrat administration. What happens if that administration flips to a Republican administration? What happens if it stays a Democratic? administration. Those things will tell you how the market's going to react. The market will have an initial reaction right after the winner of the election is announced. But it won't really start to ramp up until like January. You will definitely see that market push, especially if we flip, and I'll say this and I'll be done, especially if we flip back to a Republican administration, you'll definitely see the markets flip and the market kind of get really, really excited about that because of the things I'll explain Friday, which are like the ideals of what a Republican Party offers to the market. Hint, hint, one of those just being that Republicans like corporations. So I'll leave it at that for the markets. On the Forex Factory calendar, we had some news that came out. It was a lot of misses. But we do have some GDP news, core PCE news, and then G20 meetings later this week. So pay attention to those news items. We'll talk about at least G20 on Friday. And then if you want to, Biden started addressing the nation at 8, so like 43 minutes ago, about him stepping out of the race. So if you want to watch that, you can, to try to get some different perspective, to maybe see if there's something in there that will help you with your decision making or not. Maybe you're already decided and that's cool. But it's there. It's out there if you want to see it. So I hope that you guys have a great evening and I will see you Friday.
Cool beans, cool beans. Thank you as always, Carmen. Thank you for that fundamental sauce. You know, we appreciate everything you bring to the family, to the team, to the crew. So, with that being said, I'm going to conclude tonight's class. As always, I appreciate you guys coming out, tuning in, getting this knowledge and empowering yourselves. Let your family and friends know you love them while they still here, please. And as always, peace and love, everybody. You know